Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collingwood for YouTube, resident underslash of underslash Collingwood for BitChute, and I'm here to continue my read along reviews, a revisited tour for John Philip Betancourt's continuing blog series, The Return of Dark Chest. I say continuing. Listen, Dark Shadows is never ever really over. You know what I mean? Ever. Ever. Alright. Series 4, Chapter 1, Mothers and Daughters. The cold afternoon sea air crept over the main cliff side and onto the green pastures that surrounded both houses on a Collins family land. It's an icy and salty wave of air that burrows into your nostrils and leaves you tasting the Atlantic without ever touching the water. Alexandra felt this wind carry her feet as she burst into the old house after hearing the single gunshot from the gun filled with 6 blessed silver bullets that Carolyn used to attempt to kill Barnabas for his role in Leopold's murder. Alex wasted no time in getting into the old house and dashed through the darkened hallways all the way down the room where Barnabas, Kimberly, and her mother Carolyn were laying after the gun went off. Barnabas slowly lifted his head, allowing the flickering candlelight to hit his gray skin. He looked up and saw Alexander in total shock as a small crimson river of blood curved its way towards Alexander's feet. Barnabas got up and instantly looked down to check himself and see where the blood was coming from. He was unharmed. Kimberly, who lay unconscious on the floor after hitting her head in the fall, had blood on her too, but it did not belong to her. It was all Carolyn. "What's happening?" Alex said, kneeling down next to her mother. Blood circulating her knees. "She tried to kill me with this," Barnabas said, kicking the gun over to Alexander with his foot, not allowing any part of the blessed silver to touch exposed skin. "Mother! Mother! Wake up! Wake up, Mother!" Alex said, tapping the side of Carolyn's face. But Carolyn could not be woken. She was inches from death. The cold air from the sea now seeping in from outside into the hallways and into the room, slowly swirling around Carolyn's limp body. The physicality was at Collingwood, but soon at spiritually was lifted away to somewhere no one alive could explain. In her mind, Carolyn could hear Alex's voice echoing further and further away in the unknown place. It was perfect, all white light surrounding everything. Yet there was nothing, simply whiteness, and Carolyn walked alone. She heard no sounds, just complete and utter silence all around her. She looked down, and the white had completely surrounded her body from the ground to the air. It was as she were standing in white cloud of nothingness. There was no up, there was no down, just blank. "You've made it," a voice said from behind her. You finally made it. Carolyn turned around, and to her surprise, there standing, dressed just as Carolyn remembered her demeanor, pastels and perfectly coiffed hair, and droplet pearl earrings dangling from her perfect ears, was Carolyn's mother, Elizabeth Collins Stoddard, who died over 15 years ago. Mother, is that you? Where am I? Carolyn said, confused. You're nowhere. Yet you're everywhere, darling. This is where we go when we leave the physical. Well, it's the first place we go. Oh, I've missed you, Carolyn, Elizabeth said, embracing her daughter. Leave the physical? Do you mean, have I died? Carolyn asked with tears in her eyes. In a way, yes. And I've come to make sure your entrance into the unknown is peaceful and quiet, Elizabeth explained. I don't understand. This wasn't meant to happen. I only wanted to stop Barnabas. This isn't right. I have to go back. Maybe I'm inside the mirror again, or maybe it's all a dream, Carolyn said, looking around for a way to leave. It's no mistake. It has happened, Elizabeth said, taking Carolyn's hand. Come with me to wait here, she said, bringing Carolyn to a different place in the white space. I remember I had a gun, and I accidentally fired it. I was shot, wasn't I? Carolyn said finally, remembering her last moments as Elizabeth moved her further into the void. We don't talk about how we leave the physical here, Carolyn. It's irrelevant. All that matters is that when the light finally comes, that you walk toward it. Once you're inside, you're free, Elizabeth said. Mother, I'm not ready to be here. This is a mistake, Carolyn said, terrified. There are no mistakes, Carolyn. I wish this were, but you have come here for a reason. I know that there has been much tension surrounding you in the physical, but now you're able to let that all go. Nothing here can hurt you, said Elizabeth. But what if I'm not ready to let it go? There's too much at stake, Mother. I can't. I have to go back. Just for a little while. I'm not ready, Carolyn explained. That's not up to me, Carolyn. It's up to the fates that control when and where our time begins and ends. Once they decide, it's done, Elizabeth said. Wait a second. And what about Alexandra? Jack's gone, and now me. She's all alone. I can't stay here, please. I can't stay, Carolyn said, heartbroken over leaving Alex so suddenly. These things aren't always planned. Alexandra will be all right, Elizabeth said, cuddling her daughter. Are you here alone? Where's Daddy? And David? Carolyn asked, curious of the way things worked. Daddy is here too, somewhere. I was chosen to greet you first. Once the light comes to take us back, you'll see everyone except David, Elizabeth pointed out. Why not David? Darling, David is not here. He belongs still to the physical. He has been all this time. His time has not come. Look there. The light is coming. Are you ready? Elizabeth said, putting her arm around Carolyn. As Carolyn looked on toward the light, in slight confusion over Elizabeth's revelation over David. She saw a small crack in the white background, revealing a speck of light that was growing larger and larger, like a single star that was getting closer and closer, and brighter. As it came nearer, Carolyn dried her eyes from small tears that rolled down her fair skin and smiled at her mother, who was comforting her as she began to walk her toward the opening spear of bright light. If David is alive, I need to go back. And Carolyn said, trying to delay the inevitable. You're here, Carolyn. That is all there is, Elizabeth answered. Collinwood, Kimberly finally came to and rubbed her knees, where the bump popped up from her fall during the fight over the gun. She then noticed the stain of blood on her hands from where it seeped out of Carolyn's body. Oh my God. Is she okay? Kimberly said, crawling over to Carolyn and Alexander. She's dead. Oh, sorry. She's dead, Barnabas said coldly. He's right. I don't feel a pulse. Oh, Alex, I'm so sorry, Kimberly said, now sitting next to Alexander, who had Carolyn's head in her lap. No, this is not how my mother is supposed to die. I won't accept it, Alex said, the tears streaming down her face. There's nothing you can do, Alex, Kim said, stroking her hair. Alexandra, your mother is gone from her body, that is true. But as we did in the seance, we can still pull her back from the brink. But it's up to you, Barnabas said reluctantly, giving Alex a clue to use the powers she inherited from Claudia to pull Carolyn back. Barnabas is a slick son of a bitch. Barnabas, what are you talking about? Kimberly scolded. Alex took Barnabas' cue and carefully placed Carolyn's head on the floor as she got up from the ground. She looked over Barnabas, who didn't make a move, and Kimberly, who was still on the ground looking over Carolyn's body. Barnabas looked over again at Alex, and Alex looked at Barnabas as if to say he was ready for whatever magical spell she had cooked up. This time she wouldn't use Angelique's book, just her instincts and magic from deep inside her soul, a soul that had been tortured for weeks over Chris and Claudia and her father. Alex pulled from that tortured grief and took a deep breath. With her exile, she let out a bewitching scream of a banshee that broke windows and sent out vibrations all across Collinwood, shaking the buildings and the trees, causing a vocal wave that burst through all time and space. Suddenly, everything started to move backwards within the ripples of sound coming from Alexander's scream. Kimberly moved back to the floor. Barnabas then sat and then went back into his position on the floor next to Carolyn and Kimberly. All white. Alex's scream caused the minutes to track backwards, the hours to tick counterclockwise, and soon she was seeing everything that happened before Carolyn was shot, all in backwards motion, all before Carolyn died. She was turning back time to stop the shooting from happening to begin with, and it was working. The unknown place. As Alex's voice began to turn back, the hands of time, the sphere of light Carolyn was walking toward suddenly began to shrink back into the darkness that once surrounded both Elizabeth and Carolyn. What's happening? Why is it going away? Carolyn asked her mother. Elizabeth smiled and took her daughter, Carolyn, by both hands. The only reason the light would begin to retract is because it is no longer needed, darling. You've got your wish, Elizabeth said with tears in her eyes, as she looked around the darkness and saw that indeed the light was dimming, and Carolyn would be able to go back, thanks to Alex. I don't understand, Carolyn confessed. What does that mean? Carolyn, you're being called back. You can go back to your life in Collinwood, Elizabeth said, excited for her child. Take this as it is your chance to make things right. Make things better for everyone in your family, she added. Carolyn felt a sadness for leaving her mother, but a relief that it looked like she was going to be back to Collinwood all at the same time. I wish I could take you with me, Carol. Collinsport isn't the same without you, Carolyn said, still wiping the tears from her cheek. All my time has come and gone. I'm no longer needed in that world. But don't worry, I see everything. I'm there all around you. This is your time, but Carolyn, remember, our family's legacy is paramount. You must protect it at all costs, no matter what. Elizabeth said, her words resonating deep inside Carolyn. That's what Barnabas was doing, wasn't he? Protecting us, Carolyn realized. He has his own way of doing things, doesn't he? Elizabeth smirked. Will I ever see you again? Carolyn asked, holding both of her mother's hands in hers. You will, but hopefully not for a very, very long time. Carolyn, you are the torch holder of our family now. You and David, remember your family, Elizabeth said as he reached in and pulled Carolyn in for a hug. As they embraced, Carolyn slowly began to fade from inside the darkness and away from her mother's arms. Soon all that was left was a ghostly Elizabeth standing alone with tears streaming down her face. Collinwood. Alex saw the gun go off backwards. Time, the bullet retreat back into the silver piece her great-great-great-grandfather once owned. Then the initial scuffle of Kimberly and Carolyn over the gun. Then Barnabas jumping back into his coffin. It all went backwards, all while her powerful scream reverberated through time and space. Then she followed as her mother crept backwards down the hall and out of the old house where she got the gun. In that moment, Alex stopped the screaming spell and time resumed. Carolyn started her walk toward the exit of the old house, smoking room inside the main house to see Barnabas, but was stopped by Alex. Don't do this, Mother, Alex said, stepping in her mother's way. God, Alex, you startled me. What are you doing here? Following me? Carolyn said in a gasp, as she didn't see Alex come behind her. Scary lady. Just hand me the gun. Hand it over, Alex said, reaching for the gun behind Carolyn's back. Whatever you do not do whatever you had in mind. You've come so far, and I've already lost Daddy. I cannot lose you too. You're all I have left. And if we're going to live here in this place, when I want to have you as long as possible. So just hand me the gun, Mother, Alex said in the most mature moment of her whole life. Carolyn took the gun from behind her back and looked at it, and then looked at her daughter, who was in tears in front of her. She could see that something inside Alex was telling her to do this. Having no memory of what hadn't happened yet, she complied and handed over the gun to Alex. I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life, wasn't I? Carolyn said casually, walking over to one of the large brown leather sofas and adjusting the single strand of thick pearls around her neck. Yes, you really were, Alex answered as she put the gun back in the black lacquered box. I probably mispronounced it. I'm sorry. Your grandmother was a lot like you, you know. She always had a way of making sure I made the right choices in life. I didn't always listen, but something told me I should listen to you now. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for almost going off the deep end, Carolyn said as she looked over a large painting of her mother, Elizabeth. What were you going to do, Alex? Casually asked. It doesn't matter now. What matters is, well, is what matters. And that we are going to start fresh from this moment on, okay? Whatever happens here on out, we'll stick together. A mother and daughter team, Carolyn said enthusiastically. Alex laughed and sniffed her nose and gave her mother a big, tight hug. Carolyn dodged the bullet. Literally. In a darkened hospital room in Bangor, Maine, an elusive member of the Collins family slept in an induced sleep that he had fallen under for weeks. The feeling of calmness at Collingwood and Alex and Carolyn's emotional reunion reverberated through the air and sky all around and into David Collins' room and broke him from his deep medical-induced sleep. He gasped for air and shot straight up in his bed, sweating and panting. His eyes were bloodshot, his breath still short, his thick chest heaving for air. It was like he had been asleep for 2 decades. He looked around, his mind felt foggy. He wasn't sure he knew where he was, or if he was still dreaming. He carefully got up out of his bed and stepped on the floor, his big bare feet slowly reaching the ground. He tried to get up, but was still woozy from whatever medicine he was under. He had been a long time since his mind felt clear, and now it was an odd sensation. It seemed that at every turn in his sensations with Joanna, something would set it off, his memories of the past, and June would then give him a sedative to relax him, calm him down, and sedate him. But today was different. She hadn't come in to see him. Maybe she forgot. Maybe something had happened to her. He was locked in this room, and his mind was beginning to clear from the dizzying, for he had been subjected to for years and years. He slowly raised himself from the cot he slept in and walked over to a door and then turned a knob. It was locked. The door's small square window looked into Dr. Joanna Grayson's office. Looked. The office door was wide open, and David could see through it into a hallway. And in that hallway stood Joanna at a nurse's station, looking over papers, signing them, flipping to more papers and signing those. As David looked through his door window and into the office and through the door that was open to the hospital hallway, he saw 2 weary people walking up to the nurse's station where Joanna was looking over her paperwork. One a stranger, the other a very, very familiar face. It was Caleb and cat coming to check up on their lead that David had once been at this hospital. David's eyes watered. He recognized the man's face, but he couldn't say his name or where he recognized it from. But something deep in his psyche was telling him that this was his moment. As he stood there pacing back and forth in this room, trying to figure out what to do, it finally came to him. A memory finally broke free from the chains of 2 decades trapped behind steel doors. David went back to the small square window on his door and whispered, "Caleb." And just as he was about to pound on the door to make noise, Sebastian's face popped up from the other side of the small window, giving David a cruel, scolded look. Sebastian then smiled cruelly and wagged his finger in David's face, a silent teasing gesture that David had disobeyed the rules, and then placed a large black card over the window, blocked David's view. David was trapped. So, that's the read along, guys. I like how John did his time travel magic with Alexander here. It reminded me of something a friend of mine said in a review, that the only person who would remember time travel is the person that caused it, or the people who caused it. Or so Alex is the only person who remembers it because she made it happen, which is awesome. I love this sanitarium sequence. It was so it was heartbreaking, and David's whisper was it made you want to scream finally for him. But all that just to be no, you're breaking the rules, Doc. You're breaking the rules. Really, really well done. I enjoy these a lot. So I'm sorry for the late read, guys. I know it's going on 2 a.m. So I'm sorry about that. But link is definitely going to be in the description box. As always, I'll see you guys for tomorrow's read alongs. And have a good night.